Do you remember clip shows, Ray?
Clip shows?
Yeah.
That was something that we used, but you always saw that though, kind of it seemed like the season finale or,
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Right.
Please, this is not a harbinger or anything, is it?
No,
Okay.
not at all. I was just curious. I mean, I just wonder where they went, I mean, I feel like every show used to do a clip show, and I'm sure it was a way like cost cutting, right? Like they only had to film like a scene and then just like shove in a bunch of old scenes. But hey, you remember that time that I asked you about clip shows? Do you remember clip shows, Ray?
Clip shows?
Yeah.
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't like a harbinger of anything or anything like that.
Good.
Cue the music.
You're listening to Binder. I'm your host, Ray McManus. Hey, Drew. How you doing, man?
Oh, hey, Ray. Oh, hey, listeners at home.
That's basically all we have, are our listeners from home. Well, we have each other, Drew.
That's right.
And right now we need each other more than anything because the museum is going through a pretty wild project.
Wild is a strong word. I would say a essential project, Ray. We're in the middle of a lighting renovation. As many of you listening at home probably already know, this was an absolutely essential renovation as our lighting system was totally obsolete, which doesn't sound very exciting, I'm sure. But, it was a cool opportunity for us to take a step back and look at, what we've been doing here at the museum and kind of make a few changes. So we are in the midst of, the collection is on its way down right now, down to the basement, both so it can be safe while we do this renovation, but also so we can reinstall it. And so we're in the midst of that right now. I'm really excited to be able to show off our collection in a whole new light.
Listen to you.
In a couple, in the coming months. But in the meantime, we're still here. We're still doing stuff, I mean, just because the galleries are down doesn't mean that we're just inactive. Everyone here is working, and we have a lot of events still happening at the museum, both inside the building and outside on the plaza. People can check out the website if they want to learn more about what they can do here at the museum right now.
Mm-hmm.
But, there's also a lot you can do just from home.
There is. And, in that too is wild. I stand by my words, Drew. I think, it's a pretty impressive undertaking and what's happening and the speed in which it's happening. Cause obviously we want to get the doors back open and get everybody back in to enjoy the galleries and all that. But you're exactly right. The museum has put together, I think, wonderful opportunities for people to be able to enjoy a lot of what we're doing and have been doing for years here at the museum. For many people, probably did not have the opportunity or time to even be there to see any of that or hear any of that in person.
That's a really good point.
Which is, this podcast is a prime example, right? I mean, you could come and hear us talk, but man, you would miss it, right? So many people would miss hearing this. They get to hear it all the time.
That's true. And the beauty of this being that it's an audio format, so you don't have to see us talk.
That's right. You can go to the CMA's website. You can go to our YouTube channel, and you will not see us talk.
I solemnly swear. But that's a good point, especially about the YouTube channel, Ray. I mean, we put a lot of our programs, at least the ones that we can do in a digital format. We often put up our lectures and talks and concerts online so that if, to your point, if you did miss it when it happened, it's still available, which I think is a cool resource for people who either, to your point, missed it the first time or just want to revisit some of these classic CMA programs.
Yeah. Or even if they came and they want to revisit, but, maybe they were like me, you're watching it, you're enjoying it, and all of a sudden squirrel.
Right.
And then you just missed a whole little chunk of it. And then you spent the rest of the time trying to find your way back. That's the beauty of being able to watch it on a YouTube channel. You can go backwards, forwards, and backwards, and forwards, and backwards, and forwards. You can watch the same clip over and over and over again. And if only we could somehow demonstrate some of that to our listeners.
It's funny you should say that, because I actually went back and forth over and over again with a lot of our lectures recently to pull a bunch of clips to do this clip show that I'm hoping that you'll join with me on today. I'm actually, no, I joke. I'm really excited to show off a handful of clips from our myriad of programs that are available online. It's easy to forget how many things we've done here. You know, I've been here over 10 years, and to see the amount of different exhibitions and programs that have come through these doors is kind of mind-blowing. And you kind of get lost in it after a while. You sort of forget everything that you've done until you start going back and looking, and you go, oh, that's right. You know, I totally forgot about that whole exhibition, and it was amazing. So this was a cool opportunity for me to kind of, go down memory lane a little bit and see some of my favorite moments from the CMA's history and the time I've been here. And so I'm hoping I can share some of those with you today, Ray, and with our listeners at home. And maybe it'll inspire them to come check out some of these things themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. What I do think, before we get into that, one thing people will be absolutely amazed at is how much stuff is there, which I think really does speak volumes, if I can use that word in this context, of the museum's mission, and really trying to get itself outside of its own doors.
Yeah.
And, and to be able to see how much, that invitation that might have been original at one point at some time is still extended, I think also speaks to what is so cool about the Columbia Museum of Art. So yeah, let's look at some of these. Let's talk about them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you brought up the mission of the museum, because I really framed up the clips today based around that concept. So, for anyone who doesn't know, the museum's mission statement is actually to spark powerful connections through art from around the corner and around the world in an environment that is welcoming to all. So, I mean, just let that soak in for a second. And I think you'll start to realize why I chose a lot of the clips that I did today. So I wanted to start very much around the corner by showing off this first clip that really speaks to something that is not only around the corner, but literally across the street from us. So this clip's coming from the Curator Talk with a good friend of the show, Michael Neumeister. This is for Interior Lives. As you might remember, Ray, this was an exhibition about 19th and 20th century American art. It really was looking at how class division was like blurring during this time, but it was also sort of this rise of industrial tycoons, and sort of how luxury consumption was becoming a bit of a status symbol at that time. Not that it wasn't before, but it really was coming to its own during this time period in America, right?
Right.
And so in this clip, we're going to talk about one of those objects, or Michael's going to talk about one of those objects. And like I said, it's just around the corner for us. So let's just take a listen.
The 19th century is also a time when the United States is actively and very self-consciously kind of identifying itself, thinking about what America means. So you think in art movements of the earlier 19th century, the Hudson River School, of course, is the first painterly movement that gains prominence on the international stage. This is also a time, and we're proud to say they're represented in our galleries, where significant American manufacturers, Gorham Silver, Seth Thomas, clock manufacturing, Lenox as well, all of these organizations are founded in the 19th century. I mentioned conspicuous consumption. In the early 20th century, we can sort of think about what it meant to have a Seth Thomas clock, and we have this great example of a crystal regulator model dating to about 1910 in the first gallery. So what did it mean to have a crystal regulator in your home by Seth Thomas? And then what did it mean in 1906 for Columbia to commission not one but two Seth Thomas clocks for Main Street? And of course, I'm showing the one here that's just across the street at Sylvan Jewelry Store, which I'm sure many of you have walked by many times. It is still, I'm told, functional, and it is still working on its original mechanical means and requires winding every so often as well. So we can think about what it was for Columbia in the early 20th century, sort of identifying itself and aligning itself with the New South, perhaps competing with Atlanta in some regard. And I think this is kind of really exciting to think about.
They don't build them like they used to, Ray.
They do not. I mean, it's hard to find structures that are as old, especially in the South. But to find a clock that is a century, which is almost half the lifespan of the state.
Right.
Which is pretty impressive. First of all, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who could not just sit there and listen to Michael speak and enjoy it. Like
I'll tell him you said that.
But he'll hear it. So, I hope, because to be able to articulate, I think, that particular exhibit is expansive. Over time. Not expansive in the actual exhibit itself. It was within the confines of the museum, but the way he's able to situate and articulate the value and understanding of those things, and really bringing it up to a level of prominence. Because how many times you pass by that clock?
Right.
I passed by that thing in your entire life. When I grew up in the Midlands, so I've gone up and down Maine and Gervais and all of these other streets that we all know, but Hampton and Maine, I've seen that thing there on the corner all the time. And I loved it because it's, just intricate, and it seemed to stand out, especially around, some of the brutalist architecture we have in Columbia. But it stood out, and the fact that it still runs and all of that's impressive to just a passerby, the walker by. But, Michael does such a good job of really contextualizing the importance of it and how it represents so many bigger things and should represent bigger things to all of us.
Yeah.
That was a great clip, man.
Yeah. Well, when I tried, I didn't write any of the material. I just pulled from other people that know what they're talking about. So I'm not going to take too much credit, but
you shouldn't, but.
But you're right. I have a stove at home that has a clock on it. The stove's only 5 years old, and the LCD panel is already giving way. So if it's like 8 o'clock, it says that it's 5 o'clock because it's missing. So,
nice.
That's a perfect example of that thing's 5 years old and it already barely functions. This thing is over 100 years old and it's still operating, which is really mind-boggling. And this might be a little corny, but I think it also is sort of a reminder that, art is around us everywhere, and
absolutely.
It has an effect on our landscape and, how we interact with the places that we live and, the memories that we build with them. So it's just I think it's really cool that something that, to your point, that I see every single day, it's just outside my window. I can see it from my window in my office, that it has such a longstanding history that really tells a greater story about this region is, it's just neat to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously this region has lasted a lot longer than South Carolina. To your point, I actually looked up when South Carolina became a state because I was curious. It was 235 years ago. So, been around for a minute, but there have been people around here a lot longer than that, right?
Sure.
For centuries, and I'm not going to try to do math because I'm bad at it, but a very long time, there have been indigenous people that have called this place home. One such group would be the Catawba Nation, who obviously the museum has worked with several times over the past few years. I just heard on the radio, Ray. This is so contemporary.
Wait. You listen to the radio?
I do. My Bluetooth is broken in my car, so I'm listening to a lot of the radio right now.
Terrible.
But I just heard that the Catawba Nation has recently bought some land, I think 200 acres outside of their reservation to expand the whole reservation, which I think is really interesting because this just happened within the last week. So it'll be probably 2 weeks before anyone hears this, but it's within the past month or so, this land deal has just gone through. And I think indigenous sovereignty is one of those things that it can be a little hairy. It can be a little confusing for people that aren't living in it, right? Like,
Right.
I'm not an expert in that field, but the beauty of the CMA is that we can bring experts in. And we did just that, during our exhibition Resurgence of Renaissance that we did just a few years ago, which was about Catawba pottery. We took that as a moment to allow us to talk about some like bigger issues that the Catawba people were dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the speakers that came in was this gentleman, Jeff Harris. He's a Catawba citizen. He's also a tribal attorney. And he did a talk called Catawba Land and Indigenous Sovereignty. So you can kind of get an idea of what that's about. Like I said, I'm no expert, but this guy is. And I think he does a really great job in this next clip of just sort of breaking down a little bit of that history in a very quick format that's easy to understand. So why don't we just give it a listen?
Roll the tape.
When you think about Southeastern tribes during that time frame, and specifically for Catawba, it was all about survival. Before contact, we numbered tens of thousands. And then through disease and loss of lands, the numbers start dwindling down. Specifically for Catawba, you see as numbers start dwindling down, we actually formed a confederacy with other tribes in the same language family. So modern day Catawba, we often call it the Catawba Confederacy, but it's actually made up of Shira, of Catawba, original Catawba, of many other Siouan-based speaking tribes that clan together for survival, which really isn't different than the rest of Native history pre-contact. A tribe and a nation really was a family that came together and stayed together to support each other and to survive. So as we enter into the contact era, they do the same. And as that time moves on, as Professor Zug is referencing, eventually we hit the era where the nation is looking at removal. They identify lands that they want, and they remove, in many cases forcibly remove, Native people out to Oklahoma through the Trail of Tears. For many of the Southeastern tribes, we remain here today for various reasons. So for our friends Cherokee, many of you may know, but some may not, that there's the Eastern Band of Cherokee, which are located in the mountains, but there are two other Cherokee nations in Oklahoma. So those who remain hid in the mountains and tried to escape the Trail of Tears. For Catawba, we are in South Carolina simply because as the leadership of South Carolina during that era looked around and they said their population is dwindling, they're almost extinct. And they didn't want to put forward the state resources, the money that the state would have to put forward to help remove us. So rather than put forth those resources, they viewed it as, sometimes we refer to it as states in the country looking at it as an Indian problem, because in many ways they viewed it that way. There was land here and they wanted it. So they dealt with their Indian problem by saying, we don't have to remove them. They're simply going to go extinct because of disease and, breaking up their society as it was already happening. And that's really affected the entire relationship, the entire arc of the relationship between Catawba and the state of South Carolina, state of North Carolina, up until modern day. And as we go through the history of Catawba, you see times when land is taken through various means, sometimes through illegal treaties, sometimes through other means. And even as we regain and start rebuilding, there's restrictions. There's a little bit of misunderstanding and a little bit of, frankly, I think just being scared of what does it mean to have a sovereign inside your borders as a state? How do we deal with that? And that shows up in a lot of our legal history with the state of South Carolina. That fortunately, I think is improving today, but it's been a long, long time to get there.
Wow. It's unfortunate, I think, so many times, especially from the South, we don't talk enough about the indigenous population that managed to, stay here, why they were able to stay here, what they had to do to stay here, whereas so many were literally taken from their homes and marched out west. And that was just one of many, many, many atrocities done to the indigenous population of this country. But it's not something that's always prevalent. And when you just think about history with a capital H, right? Like almost like there's pre-Civil War and then there's Civil War and there's post-war. Oh yeah, there was a Revolutionary War. And we talk about that because of the palmetto trees, right? Bouncing off cannonballs and stuff. But we don't really talk a lot about the other stuff. But, to hear talks like that, to see artwork really allows us to dive far, far deeper than a timeline of historical events was ever going to give us, right? It's going to cause us to feel and to ask questions, and in many ways to empathize. Because you hear the expression, right? Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it, right? And I mean that's kind of true, but it's like you can't just know history alone to prevent from repeating it. When you were encountering the art, the music, if it's later in the 20th century, the film, anything of that particular era, that nation, that tribe in this particular case, and understanding more about what went into what they did to celebrate and to understand each other, then you truly feel a connection. And then I think, if we feel a connection, we're probably less likely to break the connection, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's part of why it's great that we can have programs like this, right? These programs give us an opportunity to talk about the bigger pictures surrounding these art objects, right? And in the same way as what we do with this podcast, right? Like, I mean, we talk about the art, but then we also talk about the issues that surround it. And so it just gives us an opportunity to think about it on a broader scale beyond just like, how was the pottery made? Not that isn't interesting too. It's very interesting, but like just having the ability to have these bigger conversations, I think is something really special that we get to do here at the museum. And I'm always grateful to be able to learn something new from these folks and broaden my own knowledge, Now that being said, sometimes art is just nice to look at. Sometimes it's just beautiful, right? And there's nothing wrong with that either. And this next clip is from an artist talk that we did with an artist, Irina Banerjee. And it's exactly about that. So it's kind of about aesthetic beauty. But then, she's kind of suggesting that in a way that's sharing something too. So why don't I share it with you?
Let's do it.
Beauty has a way of both healing and creating a sense of being in the world, and not only self-love, but also the love for everything with no bounds. And I think when I started to make paintings and drawings, I was very young. I mean, it's part of what you do as a child, and you create this kind of attention to this other thing that as adults you realize is about that child. And so somehow the signature that we experience in creating a mark, as we call it in contemporary art or in fine art, is this kind of sharing that is the first communication, and where the people around you understand who you are, or your presence is noted because of what you do on a piece of paper or in making something.
So yeah, I mean, just kind of that idea that even when it's, even if it was just like an abstract painting or something like that, you're like sharing emotionally somehow,
Right.
With an audience, and maybe speaking to that like kind of subconscious psychological space,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If I remember correctly, though, an example of this exhibition, a CMA was only like one of two locations, right, that showed this?
That's right. This was Visions from India.
Yeah.
And I chose this clip because I thought it was a great way to kind of talk about how we are also doing that around the world, part of our mission that we mentioned a second ago. So this was Rena herself. She's based in New York City, but this was an exhibition that was made up of contemporary Indian artists from both India and its diaspora. So, all around the world, people of Indian descent making art. And these are all like kind of the contemporary, like new stars of the art world at the time. But yeah, this was one of two locations. This was the second location in the United States that it happened. And so I think kind of one of my points here is just how special it is that we have an institution like the museum that can pull exhibitions like this and bring them to our audiences. Because I mean, I don't think people realize how rare it is to be able to see things like this.
Right.
In the South, let alone in the United States.
Exactly. I mean, it also speaks to the larger mission of connectivity. especially now. I mean, there's this back and forth of, do we need to be isolated or should we be global? And you can't really ignore the global connection,
Right.
and you can't really ignore it in this country. I mean, this is a country that is, with the exception of the indigenous population we were talking about earlier, is a nation of immigrants, right? I mean, so whether that diaspora was 200 years ago or 300 years ago for some families, or just, not even 100 years ago coming through Ellis Island. So, I mean, when you are able to see something from another country, a response to the same things that you may be trying to respond to here in your own country, you're able to see just how small the planet really is. I mean, of course you can't walk it, but, we can try.
Well, I mean, I think that's the value of cultural exchange, right? I mean, like, it really emphasizes our similarities more than our differences sometimes.
Sure. And if I remember too, this was pretty intricate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. This exhibition had a lot of different mediums in it. This was a personal favorite of mine over the last couple of years, to be honest.
Yeah.
There was quite a few pieces that really stood out to me as very unique, not just because they were from an area that I'm not familiar with, but because it was just really interesting art that I had never seen before,
Yeah, exactly.
And like, I vividly remember there being this carpet that was carved out of wood, but it was like a hyper realistic carpet,
Yeah.
So if you were to look at it from a distance, you would just think it was a rug sitting on the ground. Then you came up and you realized it was all like hand carved out of wood. It's just like the detail, like it was so fascinating,
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it was a great exhibition, a great memory for me, and that's part of the reason I brought this clip in today, so I could just reminisce on that moment. But
I love how you brought in, though, it allowed you to be able to see art that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
Because isn't that something that we always run into? We've talked about it on previous episodes. Is there anything new? Right. And then sometimes it's like, well, yeah, but you're only, if you're only looking into, one box, if you're only staying in one spot. But if you move out of that and you move away from that, chances of you encountering something new is going to probably happen. And I know that there's a resistance sometimes to that. Like, when you find the things that you like, why do you want to move away from that? But with art, you're not taking a risk. I mean, you're not losing anything by going to see something else that you're not familiar with. And if it shakes you up and it scares you, that's okay.
We've got even more clips and commentary coming up after this quick break. Hey y'all, producer Drew here with a quick question. Are you a CMA member? Relax, it's fine. I can't hear your answer anyway. But if you are, I just wanted to say thanks. And if you're not, maybe stick around for a second before you hit skip forward on your podcast app. CMA memberships put art to work for your community, connecting visitors from all walks of life with unforgettable creative experiences. Your support helps make art accessible, helping the museum keep community benefits like free admission days available to the public each month. It helps support our public programming, including this podcast, and allows us to continue to bring you new and exciting art exhibitions every year. Of course, you get plenty of perks too, including priority registration for events, special discounts on classes, camps, and merchandise, and admission not only to the CMA, but over 150 Southeastern museums. At the CMA, inspiration is around every corner, and it's all thanks to you. Fuel creativity and South Carolina with a CMA membership. Now, thank you. And back to the show. If you want to talk about a painting that people know about, this next clip is going to tell you all about that. Do you just want to guess what painting we're going to talk about in this next clip?
I'm going to guess it is Mona Lisa.
It's almost as if it was written in front of you. Here's a clip about the Mona Lisa and her voyage to America.
When Jackie Kennedy visited Paris in 1962, she caused a sensation there with her inimitable style and perfect command of French, and befriended the Minister of Culture, André Malraux. This started a conversation about lending the Mona Lisa to the United States. So this was an extraordinary ask. She had been stolen in 1911 and only returned in 1913. And the thief, Vincenzo Perugia, had stated that his was a patriotic act meant to finally return her to her native land. She was also in a perilous state of preservation because someone had hit her with a rock in 1956, damaging her left elbow. And Le Figaro, the French newspaper, actually published an editorial saying this would be the third assault on the Mona Lisa. Do not let her go to the States. But after a horrific incident of a plane full of 122 American tourists crashed at Orly Airport, Malraux and Charles de Gaulle decided that they wanted to make some sort of gesture to the U.S., and they decided that they would send Whistler's mother, it's very American painting, and the Mona Lisa as well. But the Mona Lisa would not be a museum loan to the National Gallery, but rather a personal loan to John and Jackie Kennedy. But after considerable negotiations considering the proper transport, containment, humidity levels that would cause the least damage to the delicate picture, the Mona Lisa was given a first-class cabin on the SS France, the world's longest ocean liner, and she started a 10-day journey across the Atlantic. Edward Folliard, a reporter with a really strange relationship to the Mona Lisa, and who had long harbored a desire to bring it to the U.S., accompanied her on the journey and reported to the Washington Post daily. But the portrait was sealed inside a cabin, and there was really nothing to report beyond the fact that the chefs were making dishes like roast beef Leonardo and parfait La Gioconda. So Folliard instead satisfied himself with bizarre musings, creating this dialogue with the portrait where she asks if he finds her beautiful, and he responds, "Well, as we say in the States, I think you're a lot of woman."
Dear God. Only in America can an American be able to eat a roast beef sandwich on a boat with the Mona Lisa. But she's been assaulted enough. I don't think she needs to go to America. It's absolutely, oh God, it's sad and beautiful at the same time.
I love this clip. So this was actually former guest of the show, Dr. Anna Swartwood-House. She is an art history professor over at the University of South Carolina. But the name of this lecture is Donatello, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, the Italian Renaissance in America. So all of my favorite Ninja Turtles are represented in this lecture. This was part of our European Splendors exhibition from a few years back, which is, of course, our Crest collection. If you want to talk about around the corner, just next to that clock we were talking about earlier is the old Crest building.
That's right.
Crest 5 and dime stores were, a staple in the American South in the early part of, I guess, the 20th century. Don't quote me on that. I'll fact check myself before I leave that in there. This is a great lecture. She is a really compelling speaker. If you haven't watched this for yourself, listeners at home, you should really check this out because it's full of great little moments like that. It's one of my favorite for that reason. I mean, she really does a great job of contextualizing a lot of these works and just like finding really fascinating little tidbits of information like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think too, just in her wealth of knowledge, but it, it appealed to me as the poet, the way she personifies the painting,
right?
So that it's not a painting; it's an actual person,
right? Referring to her as she the whole time.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And and I think because we do have. I mean, if you think about those iconic pieces of art that because you can say Mona Lisa, most people can picture that they've seen a picture of the Mona Lisa. Some people have seen it in person, I'm sure, but most of the time you've seen it in a book. What about what it is, and I think those are real connections, and somewhat intimate connections that we have with certain pieces. So I like that. Plus, she's one of those that you're right, you could just listen to her talk.
Yeah.
So I think I could probably just put together a playlist maybe of just hers and Michael's lectures.
Yeah.
And,
Just listen to it at night before you go to bed.
Yeah, and I'll wake up smart.
Just take it all in subconsciously.
Yeah, just do it.
And all of you at home can do that too. That's actually a great suggestion, Ray. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Not listening to this show. I mean, don't listen to this show and go to bed. And
not unless you want nightmares.
Yeah, you will not wake up smart.
Yeah. Oh, well, I thought we would stay kind of on the European continent for this next clip, Ray. Just stick to the theme here, So as I mentioned before, in our mission statement, one of the points of it is the spark powerful connections through art, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means that art is inspiring other art. I think you know about this pretty well. You've done a little bit of that yourself, and I know you're kind of a fan of that. So I thought, these next couple of clips actually all sort of revolve around this theme. So,
cool.
I would love to get some of your insights as we go forward. This clip's actually coming from a lecture, The Secret Lives of Great Artists, which was a program we did for Van Gogh and his inspirations. Listeners at home probably remember the Van Gogh exhibition. It was our highest attended of all time. So there's a good chance if you're listening, you saw this exhibition. But you may not have seen this lecture, and it's really worth your time. This was done by the curatorial researcher for the exhibition, Alyssa Velasquez. And in this clip, she's talking about a French Barbizon school painter, Jean-Francois Millet, who's a pretty well-known painter, and his influence on two different individuals, one being a con man and the other a playwright.
In a bit of irony, the frequent copying of Millet's work would lead to a number of art market controversies. A young man by the name of Jean-Charles Millet would begin selling forged pictures under the name of his famous grandfather, Jean-Francois Millet. He was eventually caught and, as I turn the page, leaving you in suspense, convicted due to his mistake in signing some canvases at the top rather than the bottom. Millet's life story became the source of inspiration for many 19th century painters, and would eventually be made into a play by Mark Twain. Is He Dead is not one of Mark Twain's best works, but it is a rather amusing tale of Millet faking his own death to inflate his market value, because only dead painters achieve fame and fortune.
You can't see how pumped Ray is from listening to that clip, but he is pumped.
Oh,
so
just waiting to know.
How many live poets achieve fame and fortune, Ray?
2. There's only 2.
I thought that's a fun clip. This lecture, much like the last one of those two, is filled with these like little anecdotes that are really fun to learn about.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so cool. I think when you hear art lecture, right? You think you're going to go in and it's going to be really boring,
right?
But so much of these lectures are anything but boring,
right?
They're really entertaining. They really do give you a sense, really, of the artist or the artwork in a way that you couldn't just pick up off a placard on a wall or listening to somebody talk or reading it out of a book, because you're hearing it from somebody who actually knows something about this, and they're very passionate about it. So their passion and their enthusiasm comes out. But those little anecdotal snippets, those little things that those factoids, if you will, that are just going to be, kind of off the beaten path. And suddenly I'm thinking differently about that particular piece. That exhibition was such a cool one for a lot of different reasons. One that you mentioned already, that it was the highest attending ever, but that's when we had a poet summit.
That's right. Yeah.
And so we had Nicole Brown and Jessica Jacobs and Ashley M. Jones, and we did some workshops. We did a cool reading, and then we had so much fun just being able to hang out with poets, and poets getting to hang out with, Van Gogh stuff. And I think too, that to hear that, there's still art out there that's worthy of being copied. What a great compliment, right?
I love that. And like, I mean, to your point, yeah, I mean, I think it is great to hear from the experts, right? Because sometimes they've dove into this so deeply and they've had the time to really like think about this for so long that they've like discovered these like really great like anecdotal moments. But then also sometimes it's great to hear from someone who isn't maybe necessarily an expert on the subject, but
Yeah.
maybe is just a creative themselves, that like feel some real inspiration. To your point, those poets from just a moment ago from the Poetry Summit, but also like the gentleman in our next clip. This is a video game designer, William Cheer, and he created a video game called Manifold Garden, which is available on modern platforms if you want to play it for yourself. But it's heavily inspired by MC Escher, and we brought him in during our MC Escher show. And so this was just like a really cool way to kind of see that cross platform, if you will, inspiration between like the studio arts and what is really a very contemporary art form. So let's just give it a listen.
There is a lot of exposure to MC Escher growing up from like math textbooks, right? You always kind of see, I seem to recall his art on the cover of a number of these books. But also I started working on Manifold Garden in 2012, and 2 years prior I had seen Inception, and that movie of course has a lot of MC Escher references. And in the movie there's a scene where they're in the dream world in Paris and the characters fold the city in half and then start walking up the wall. They change gravity. And I remember when I saw that, I thought, hey, this would make for a great game. Or maybe not so much that I didn't quite think that it would make for a great game at the time, but I thought I wanted to be in a world like that at the time where I could experiment with different gravities. And I think a game is just a really great medium for having a system where you can kind of play with the rules and experiment with what's going on.
So I want to give a little context here. When we did this talk, first of all, it was in 2020. So this was a virtual talk. Obviously, we weren't able to bring him into the building in person, even though we would have loved to. But I knew nothing about this. I knew nothing about him. I knew nothing about his game. And I got to tell you, Ray, since then, I got so interested in it and it just looks so cool that I checked it out for myself. It ended up being one of my favorite pieces of media that I experienced like that year. And maybe in the last few years, it's like so revolutionary and interesting in its approach because you really are kind of in these Escher-like worlds, solving puzzles within like these kind of infinite spaces, which is it's hard to describe on a podcast. I think you just kind of need to see it for yourself. But it was such a unique experience, and I love the idea that like the way that he interacted with Escher was not going to a museum necessarily. It was picking up a math textbook or like seeing a movie that was also inspired by this artist. And I think it's like, that's a great example of like how artists inspire artists and continue to inspire new artists. And like how that like quote unquote canon, even though that can be a controversial word, can like move in a lot of different directions. I say all that just to say like, much like what I was saying earlier with the Catawba lecture, I was able to learn about something I had never heard of and ended up becoming one of my new favorite things, and like being able to go to these programs and get those opportunities is just really special. It's really exciting. And I don't take it for granted. I get that I'm a lucky guy. I got a good job.
You are a lucky guy. You get to work with me too. I mean, that's pretty.
Well,
that's
it's not
pretty
got too
lucky.
far.
I mean, come on. Let's face it. All jokes aside, you're lucky. I'm lucky. Yeah, I mean, well, and also, I mean, in a much larger picture, I mean, I do love the aspect of art and game, and play, because I think we put so much emphasis on art representing serious things, big things. And then we get a lot of that in poetry, right? Because all poetry is about death and all poetry is about love and the love of death, right? So, I mean, those are the only categories. But we, there's to me, I love the ones that play on whimsy or make me do things with language that I did not expect to do.
Right.
And and in challenging me to do things with language that I wasn't planning to do. And so art that allows us to interact with it and to use it and play with it, it's special because you don't get to do that with just about anything else, right? You can't just take something off the wall, man, and don't do that, no matter how much you want to.
I mean, I love that, especially considering, like beyond our mission statement, we also have these things called experience promises. And one of them is to be playful. We here at the museum really believe that play is something for all ages and that play as an adult is actually really important. I think,
Yes, it is.
I think that at some point in our lives, it becomes this thing where it's like, oh no, you got to stop playing because that's not what being an adult is. But like, let me tell you, I completely disagree with that sentiment. Completely.
All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
I don't know where Ray went, but if you could bring him back so we can finish the podcast, that would be great.
That was it. That was the end.
Oh, hey. See, we play all the time. We're playing right now. But, I think to get this train back on track, Ray, because we can't just play around forever. Like I said, I think it's something that we tend to lose as we get older, and getting back in touch with that is really important. And I just love that, after seeing this lecture, I kind of got to get back in touch with that a little bit myself, So that was a great unintended consequence of us bringing that guy on. So with that being said, I do have one more clip for us today that also has a couple of artists involved in it. As I mentioned before, we've been listening to predominantly talks today. I mean, it was the name of the episode. It's Welcome to My Art Talk. I know, very clever. But we have a lot of different types of programs.
Yes, we do.
Available online for your consumption. Beyond talks, I mean, we also have concerts, performances, poetry readings. So there's a lot there to check out. This clip actually kind of combines at least 3 of those. It has music, poetry, and dance, though you're just going to have to imagine the dance, as you're not going to be able to see it in this audio format. But it's just a reason to go back and watch it for yourself. This was a very recent program for the opening of Unsettled, the Landscape in American Art. And I bet you Ray could tell you a whole lot about this because he helped program it. Ray, do you want to cue us up on this clip?
Yeah, so we're gonna hear Marlanda DeKine, who is a poet out in Georgetown and another fellow South Carolinian, and a South Carolinian poet. We wanted to do something that would be, a little different with Unsettled, and I knew that Marlanda had done some work with some previous museums, and that incorporated poetry, music, and dance, and man, that was such a cool show. That was so much fun to watch and a very moving piece. And really, you want to talk about contextualizing art and contextualizing an exhibit. It happened in that space. I think there were so many people that were moved by that experience.
Yeah. And I think this clip, especially, as you'll hear in a moment, really also contextualizes a little bit of that around the corner, because this is very South Carolina centered. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and play the clip.
An erasure poem where West and Central Africans, enslaved African people, and Black people are not mentioned. Face, the land of these peoples. Names, the bay, Winya, the rivers, Sandpit, PD, Waccamaw, Santee, Hopsawee, Chicora Wood, Wachesaw. Tangible reminders of the past in Georgetown County. The native, conscious of the history of Georgetown County, land of live oaks and Spanish moss.
I feel like that clip, it really exemplifies a lot of what we've been talking about today. It's so heavy, but like in such a powerful and like interesting way.
Right.
And, you can kind of catch it a little bit in the audio, but you can hear like some Starlet Miller, the dancer. You can actually hear her feet shuffling. It gets caught in the microphone,
Yeah,
So,
it's cool.
which is, it just adds this extra element. This is one of those that really, it does not sing the way it should unless you see it for yourself. You gotta go watch this performance. I'm so glad that we have a recording of this available for people, because it's like 30 minutes of power, man. Like
it was so immersive. I mean,
Mhm.
you were just, from the moment it started to it ended, you were just pulled in. I mean,
Yeah.
it was really cool. I'd like the fact too that Marlanda has just a wonderful way of being able to ease us in to this space. And a lot of it is, she is trying to keep a very deliberately slow pace with the movement, with the music. But it does it, and of course, and what we can't show, or obviously on the podcast, but they can see if they watch it on the clip, is that there's an image on the background. And so and so you're watching it and hearing it and seeing it all unfolding. So it's a sensory experience,
Yeah.
And that is something that we do desperately yearn for sometimes. I think when we go and we look at art, we're using our sense of sight. And unless, we have something for, our non-sighted patrons and that sort of thing. But for the most part, that is the sense we're using. And what she was able to do was really bring in other senses around this experience and create a moment that completely immerses you. And of course it's poetry, so it's cool automatically. But but Marlanda just does it for me, man. She just got such a powerful voice that's just so understated. So
Yeah, and it just shines throughout that entire performance. And I love Moses Andrews's improvisatory piano throughout the entire thing. I mean, like, what people don't realize at home is they had like one practice.
That's right.
That's
right.
And it comes off so rehearsed when you see it performed. But like, it really was improvisatory. Like, so much of it was happening on the fly, and they kind of knew where it was going, but they were also sort of responding to one another. And it's just like, performances like that just get me so excited, and they really like speak to the power of art, and art as a platform that can inspire other artists. And so, like, I really wanted to end with that, not only because it's just an awesome performance, but because we were involved in it, and you've been involved in so many cool performances and readings here at the museum over the years. Pretty much the whole time I've been here, you've been involved in some shape or form. So cheers to you, Ray. Right back at you, bud. And your very cool programs. I look forward to seeing many more of those in the future. Before we sign off today, Ray, I just wanted to give listeners at home a little bit of heads up of, as I promised, we do have programs happening at the museum right now.
Absolutely.
Knowing when this comes out, I'm not going to get too in the weeds with it, but I just wanted to give people a heads up of some upcoming things if they're interested in checking them out. Right now, our executive director is giving out hard hat tours to the public. So if you want to see what's happening with this renovation project we mentioned at the very beginning of the episode, you can check out our website and sign up for one of those. They're free. And you can ask her all of your questions about what we're going to do with the reinstallation and how lights work. No, but they're pretty fun. You get to walk around a construction site, and how cool is that, right? Like,
that's right.
So, if that's something you're interested in doing, I highly suggest it. In March, we're going to have our very first, actually Columbia's very first ever Ramadan night market. It's going to be on Thursday the 6th, so March 6th, excuse me. So if that is something that is of interest to you and you want to see some more of that around the world that we've been talking about in this episode, that's a great opportunity to do that. So please come check it out. We always have new art classes coming. We're bringing back Play on the Plaza this spring. So if you have some little kids and you are looking for something to do on Saturday morning, want to have some fun, there's some free family fun at the museum. And of course, we always have plenty of events being held by our affinity groups here, concerts and many, many other things. So just be sure to go to our website, columbiamuseum.org, and take a look at what we have coming up and sign up for a few things. It's going to be a really cool spring, and May's going to be here right around the corner. I'm going to be reopening the galleries downstairs, so we'll be excited to invite you back then. And what I'm excited to do is to thank Ray for sitting down with me once again to vamp for an hour about CMA-related programs.
Hey, it's one of my favorite things to do, Drew. Both of those things, to vamp about CMA and to be able to sit and talk to you. And I would say, in addition to all those other things, and those are really amazing things, also tune into more of our episodes.
That's right. We got a whole lot of exciting things planned for the year. I have sent Ray a lot of suggestions, and he has sent me a big shrug. And so we're going to make it happen.
So we're doing all of them.
Joking aside, I am actually very excited for a lot of the ideas we have coming up for this year for the podcast. We got some cool guests involved, and we got some neat new angles to talk about art, and then, some that you may not see coming. So be sure to keep tuning in and listening to all of our episodes here on the Binder Podcast Network, which is something I just made up. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? I hope you all enjoyed our trip down memory lane. If you're interested in seeing more of any of the talks and lectures we featured today, I'll leave some links in the show notes. And if you'd like to see even more virtual programs that we have to offer, you can check them out on our website, columbiamuseum.org, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, at Columbia Museum of Art. We've got a lot planned for this year at the museum and on this podcast, and I can't wait to share more with all of you very soon. See y'all next time.
You've been listening to Binder, a production of the Columbia Museum of Art. Today's episode was hosted by me, Ray McManus, produced and edited by Drew Barron, with special assistance from Joel Ryan Cook. For more information about CMA exhibitions and programs, visit our website at www.columbiamuseum.org.